spoil sports. Don't just bet. Choose wisely.
Hello and welcome back to On The Wire, brought to you by our sponsors, Boyle Sports. We have got a cracking episode for you today. It is a Cheltenham Festival ante-post preview. But before we get to the star-studded lineup I'd like to remind you of a fantastic offer from our sponsors, Boyle Sports. If you bet €10, you are entitled to €70 worth of free bet credits. You can scan the QR code on screen or down in the link down in the description below. But make sure to get involved in what is a fantastic offer from our sponsors, Boyle Sports. Yeah, delighted to be joined by a brilliant panel of guests yet again. Gavin, Mark, and Sir Daniel J. Overall, as we should be saying, because last time we were on the wire, Dan, you gave us a 50-1 winner of the Welsh Grand National in Val Dancer, and then you went and, for good measure, rubbed our noses in it and backed the Paddy Power winner around a half hour later. Well done.
So I think we've learned that can we ignore all the graded race and just make this a handicap-only kind of podcast from here on out? I think that would kind of work. You dubbed yourself the king of the 29th of December, I believe. I think I'll just have Sir Dan of the 27th from here on out. That'll do me. I think I've used up all my luck early, though. That is, it was a good Christmas anyway.
Yeah, it does seem like you have. I would have thought it couldn't be one-upped, but at the same time, Gavin gave us 6 tips and did give us 5 winners. So I think you have been one-upped, and we've got Gavin again. Gavin, I'm sure quite a lucrative Christmas as a result.
Not too bad. Won a few quid, but no 50-1 winners. If I'd have backed that now, it might have been better. But there you go. Well done, Dan. Super stuff.
Yeah, and Mark, obviously our tirade into 80-102s was unsuccessful. Collaborative didn't bring home Christmas, unfortunately. But we've gone for Grade 1 races this time round to try and even the playing field with the lads.
Yeah, thank God for Gallopin de Champs. That's all I'd say over Christmas. I think we're going to call St. Stephen's Day over the 26th, St. Overall's Day the 27th. I don't know what you want to refer some sort of Barry Connell mention into the 29th maybe for yourself. But yeah, look, it's brilliant action and fairness for what we could see of it out of the fog. Obviously, the first couple of days were challenging, but it all gets very serious now from DRF onwards, and even Tiesty's Chase Day. I love that down in Gorn. So, no, plenty more twists and turns to be anticipated. Just hope we can see it in whatever weather conditions come up.
Yeah, well, on the wire, the last couple of episodes, we've kind of inadvertently looked at the likes of the Gold Cup, the Champion Chase, Champion Hurdle. So we're going to have a real deep dive into the novice races. We've got the 3 Grade 1 Novices Hurdles in the Supreme, the Turners and the Albert Bartlett, and the Arkle and the Brown Advisory. We'll be picking the lads' brains on all of them. We'll be going to the Supreme first, which obviously over the last couple of weeks, we've managed to get a few more clues. Salvatore Mundi, favourite for the race. Romeo Coolio, second favourite, having won the Grade 1 at Leopardstown. Dan, come to you first about Salvatore Mundi. Obviously a talking horse, very much dividing opinion after Sunday. I suppose you can look at it in 2 very different ways. Did a lot wrong, still did win, which is impressive. But he did do an awful lot wrong.
He did everything wrong. Forget an awful lot. I mean, he managed to win the race, and considering how it panned out, I mean, the finishing speed was 112.6%. It was an absolute crawl. It was the same time as the maiden hurdle that followed it. I think they were very hesitant to Paul was hesitant to let him jump on, which really did affect his jumping because of that keenness he was showing early. So he overcame a lot of issues. And I think from what we've seen of him previously, we know he is capable of jumping better. Obviously, he's going to have that all sorted ahead of the Supreme. And I don't think you'd necessarily be looking at him as a bulletproof favourite by any stretch of the imagination. I do think his price is probably a tad on the short side. The only reason I'd say it's almost half fair is because the vibes have been very strong about this horse as the Supreme horse for the yard, it seems. And if he is the Willie Mullins #1 who's just won the Moscow Flyer, it's hard to see him necessarily getting much bigger than that, especially with the race as it is. There aren't too many there lurking. We may get 1 or 2 maybe come out of the Dublin Racing Festival, but that market seems not established, but pretty steady at the minute. Obviously, he has a fair bit to improve on from that run, but we know with his back form from Sagino, we know from what they've said about him, he does have a lot of ability, but at the same time, tongue tie on, keen. He's a fair enough vulnerable favourite, I'd say. I'd have Romeo Coolio a bit shorter in the betting compared to him anyway.
I suppose, like, I'm obviously a staunch Barry Connell defender, as the lads will know. And there's been an awful lot of talk about Marine Nationale, about tongue straps, about head carriages and stuff like that. And everyone here is telling me the horse can't breathe. Yet Patrick Mullins mentions his breathing 5 times in a post-race interview. And yet nobody seems to be questioning this horse's ability to breathe if it was on heavy ground. Like, Dan, is that not, surely if you're taking a pretty skimpy price about this horse for the Supreme, you have to be bearing that in mind somewhat?
The Marine Nationale won the Supreme 2 years ago, and he's still being brought up by yourself. It's impressive.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's your only Supreme winner to date, and don't we know about it? My lord. No, of course it is. There are a lot of stones you can throw at what Salvatore Mundi has done. It would definitely be a concern for me. But at the same time, like I mentioned, you've got Romeo Cooley there, I'd say he's rock solid. But I also do get somewhat concerned. He's almost your archetypal second or third place in a Supreme horse. You can see him, like, he does an awful lot right, and that performance at Leopardstown was very good. He'll probably be ridden handily. A strong 2 miles, I think it's absolutely going to suit him. And I think Blue Devassi here, who's eventually a 9-length second, is a horse I have a lot of time for as well. I just do worry that he'll just be there jumping the second last. He'll be in front, and something will come past him. He just has that sort of eventual 3-mile kind of profile to me. I'd be with you in terms of, I do think you can have a lot of question marks about Salvatore Mundi as it stands. But at the same time, unless something really springs out from that Willie Mullins team at the Dublin Race Festival, and even if it does, I think Salvatore Mundi still might be their number one. You'd be hard-pressed to just immediately dismiss the Willie Mullins number 1 shot in the Supreme, because it's always, or generally has been, a very successful race for the team.
Yeah, look, we've just watched Romeo Cooley there, Gavin. He's obviously a very good horse, second in the champion bumper. He's done very little wrong in his career. I suppose that Royal Bond second to Toons Evader was a little bit of a blip in the road, seemingly with no massive excuse. But it was brilliant to see him back at Leopardstown doing, I think, what probably the connections were thinking he would have done in the Royal Bond.
Yeah, it was. Last year he was a good bumper horse. They held him up. He was a travelly thing. He was ridden in the bumper down the inside, turning it to the straight in Cheltenham, which is the worst of the ground. So it was a good run. Then he disappointed Punchestown. The thing I love about him this season is that he was a bit like you, as we said before in the nightclubs, Andrew, a bit keen. But he this season has been as quiet as a lamb. He won a terrible race in Down Royal, but settled perfectly. The Royal Bond, I was disappointed after the race, obviously getting beaten by Toons Evader, but perhaps it was a slowly run race, beaten by more of a flat horse than he is. And I tell you what might actually turn out to be a good thing for him was that in Leopardstown the last day, Patrick's horse made a dreadful mistake at the second, and Romeo Cooley went on, like say a mile and a half out. And I think that making the running or being up at the pace, I'd say might end up being his cup of tea, because he travels so strongly, he jumps really well. He made a mistake at the last, so did the second horse, Blue Devassi, but he won by 9 lengths. The time was 3 seconds quicker than the handicap hurdle. Now, that was won by a Barry Connell trained horse, but, you know, c'est la vie, who is a 10-year-old rated 1:33, I think. But it was 3 seconds quicker, which is about 12 lengths. So the time was good. It was a really good performance. Just go back to Salvatore Mundi. I was thinking there that if you're analysing a race or a horse, there's 6 things you're looking for. So ask yourself, how many of these did he tick the box in? 1 is before the race. Not really. How was he keen during the race? Definitely. Was his jumping good? No. Did he handle the ground? Yes, he did. Has he got an engine? Absolutely. And was the time of the race any good? It wasn't. Now, I did go back and look at Salvatore Mundi's previous 3 runs over hurdles in Otay, which, believe it or not, by the time he runs in the Supreme, he'll be a month short of running over hurdles for 2 years and still a novice. But his jumping on Otay and also in the Triumph Hurdle and in Tipperary was fine. So I don't think that's too much of a worry. But certainly the keenness, the fact that he's been to Cheltenham before, to the Triumph Hurdle, will help him in terms of the crowd, the noise, how busy it is. He needs to settle. He needs to be calm. I'm going to go for Romeo Cooley, but I probably just would have a small saver on Salvatore Mundi just because if he behaves himself, he's got a massive engine, but he certainly has a few questions to answer.
Yeah, well, if you do agree with Gavin and you do fancy Romeo Cooley, our sponsors, Boyle Sports, have a boost for you. They're boosting Romeo Cooley from today at 5 o'clock till Thursday at midnight to 15-2, which is an industry standout price. Max stake 50 quid. I suppose in years gone by, the couple of maiden hurdles at Leopardstown on Stephen's Day have sometimes been a pointer to grade ones. We obviously didn't see a whole pile of those races, but Coppock to Board won just by jumping like his tail was on fire, and Work Ahead won and he actually looked very impressive, despite maybe not having the market confidence of some of the other horses. Would either of them interest you, whether it be in a Supreme or maybe going up in trip for Kopek de Board in the Turners?
Yeah, so kind of two things on those, Andrew. For me, Kopek de Board, I think engine-wise, he's entitled to be shorter than he is in the betting for this, but his jumping was a massive red flag, I suppose, what he did, but ability is there, and it seems to be, reading the comments from Connections, that it was very much out of character what he did jumping-wise over Christmas. I thought it was still a fair performance. I didn't think a horse could win a race at that sort of level, jumping as he did, and he still managed to. And his performance at Fairyhouse last year in that George Myrna bumper, the Tattersall Sales bumper, I thought that was outstanding. I think he's a real talent, and I think the market at the moment is probably shaped by the lack of a standout challenger to Salvatore Mundi. And you touched on the breathing angle there. It did create a concern for me too when I seen him wearing a hood and a tongue tie previously, race without the tongue tie, then they fit the tongue tie back on. In recent years, I can't find any Grade 1 winner at Cheltenham that's won with a hood and a tongue tie on him. You can go back and find handicap winners, I think maybe 3 of 48, something like that, in different various handicaps, but a couple of them are very, very well in on the day, possibly Delta Work being one of them in upper temps. Even hoods in general in Grade 1s, I think you look at the last 10 years, maybe 1 for 54 in Grade 1s, horses wearing hoods. It just wouldn't be my cup of tea in general, and I'm concerned to see the tongue tie on, but clearly a horse of huge ability. And just you touched on work ahead there as well. I thought that was very, very taken over Christmas. Again, a maiden hurdle that has good history. I really liked what he did. They're going straight there too. He seems to be a horse that hasn't been the easiest to train down the years. He's missed time. But what really impressed me was how he quickened away again, coming towards the second last, put the foot to the floor. I think William Money is no mug. You'll obviously think he's top drawer in those colours, but it was no mean feat to put him away the way he did. And maybe I see there's been blue across the odds checker in the last few days for him. Unfortunately, I haven't managed to avail of the nicer stuff, but I do think he is a live player in a race that, we're probably going to get a couple more clues before then. But, the likelihood of Salvatore Mundi going straight there, I don't see him easing out unless there's a big performance. I think the one thing could be the Kopek de Board. If he went to the DRF, jumped better, and was able to show his engine in a better light, he could be the one that tightens up a good bit. So they'd be 2 for me at the moment, but Kopek is probably the one with the bigger engine, I think.
We'll move on to the Turners Novices Hurdle, the intermediate trip. And at the moment, it's kind of dominated by 2 English horses, really, in the shape of the New Lion, now in the ownership of JP McManus, having won the Challow Hurdle, and Potter's Charm, who obviously won the Form B. Dan, I know you've got a soft spot for Nigel Twiston-Davis horses, and I must confess, it's not a popular opinion, but I almost like the profile of Potter's Charm going into this race more than the New Lion, because I just think he'll be a bit tougher, and he's been in a battle or two. As for the New Lion, we've seen, I suppose, before with some of these English horses, they don't come off the bridle and then they kind of get worried out of it when it comes to the festival. Potentially the New Lion might be the horse with more class, maybe a bit more ability, but Potter's Charm does have a very likeable attitude and a winning attitude at that.
He absolutely does, yeah. I mean, we saw the back end of that race at Aintree, again, a race we didn't see all that much of. We really couldn't tell what was going to come out of the fog there, but he did it pretty well. I think the drop back in trip was a slight concern for that. The ground wasn't as testing as perhaps normally is around Christmas time as well, but he dug deep to win. I think Miami Magic in second is a really useful horse in his own right. I'd be very interested to see where his career goes. Obviously, he did win on the old course as well, where he beat Manila 6-0. So he's had that experience. I mean, realistically, any Nigel Twiston-Dave horse who turns up at Cheltenham has probably had 4 or 5 runs and lots of experience. That's just how they're campaigned. I can see him running well. I do think this race is still crying out for something else to emerge. As you say, we're in a bit of a strange position where realistically the front 3 in the market have probably already laid out their credentials for the race. And yet we still have the most informative weekend, arguably pre-Cheltenham, in terms of the Dublin race all coming up. So I believe something will come out of that. And I think we touched on him earlier. I think Kopek de Board might be the one for this race now. See, William Mullins seemingly crying out for something in this. Obviously, Salvatore Mundi seemingly going to be the number 1 for the Supreme. I would say Kopek de Board has a really good chance of winning the 2-mile race at the DRF. And I'd say, based on how he did that last day at Christmas, obviously his jumping was terrible, but I think Patrick's comments post-race were interesting, where he thought something was perhaps niggling him slightly, which causing his jumping issues, and he seemingly thought he had no chance coming around the bend because of all the mistakes he'd made. But to still pull away from a decent horse in Cowabunga, I thought was a really solid performance. I see him winning that 2-mile race at DRF, and it's generally been quite an even split as to where they've gone after that, the Supreme or the Turners. But I think it's a dangerous game trying to guess William Mullins and where his horses are going to lie up. We know Salvatore Mundi's laid out his credentials for the Supreme. There's no chance he goes up in trip at all. Whereas Kopek de Board, obviously an impressive bumper winner on heavy ground. I don't think he'll have any issue stepping up in trip. I think he could be the one, perhaps, as the springer in the market to emerge and perhaps get a bit shorter relative to the likes of the Yellow Clay, Potter's Charm, and the New Lion.
Yeah, no, he seems to be an obvious one. Gavin, obviously looking at another maiden hurdle over Christmas time, I was quite taken by Cade Doty beating Cocktail Divan. I thought that was a strong enough race with the two of them. Cade Doty's been entered in the 2 mile race at the Dublin Racing Festival, but as Dan mentions, you wouldn't know. They could run in that 2 mile race and you still wouldn't have a clue what race they'll end up at Cheltenham. They could easily go up in trip.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I echo basically what Dan has said. The New Line wins the Challow. The result, the winners of the Challow have a poor record at Cheltenham. We all know that. The horse that was second, the Challow, was rated 127. Potter's Charm has gone and beat Manila 6-0. And Valgrand, who didn't stay the next day, wins the Formby the last day. The Yellow Clay, he wins well at Naas, but I just still 50-50 whether he'll go to the Albert Bartlett or whether he'll go here at the Turners. I definitely like Kopek de Board, massive engine, jumped terribly, as he said, for Patrick at Christmas. Him or Cade Doty, I think one of those two is going to come alive, and probably more so for this race. They'll probably run over 2 miles, the two of them. I could see one of them winning, depending. Cade Doty jumping at Christmas was just okay. Kopek de Board was terrible. Cocktail Divan is going to be Henry's representative, it looks like, in the Turners. But I've had no bet in the Turners yet, and I'm not even close to having a bet. I think the front two at 5-2 and 7-1 is a bit short. And I think it's better to hold fire till after the DRF to decide what to back in the Turners.
Yeah, it's a tricky race. Mark, I suppose kind of a little bit of a half and half really with the Yellow Clay, because we can half kind of segue onto the Albert Bartlett, because as Gavin mentioned, he was brilliant in the Lawlers and Ace. He kind of gives me Ginto vibes, though. He kind of looks like I don't look at him thinking he possesses all massive natural speed, but he's been 2.5 miles probably on heavy ground suits him. If it was slightly nicer ground at the festival, would you potentially go up to the 3 mile?
You could possibly, but I was in the press huddle after he won the Lawlers, and I asked Gordon Elliott about targets, and the Albert Bartlett didn't come onto the radar in that sense at all. So it surprised me that I could understand visually maybe watching it thinking he could be a Bartlett horse, but they were concerned whether they'd even run him on Lawler's morning. The ground was so testing. So if they're thinking that at 2.5, perhaps that's to avoid a grueler at that point of the year. But it just wouldn't shock me. I do think this is probably where he'll end up in the Turners, just based off feeling I got there on the day. And the case that you've made yourselves with that novice hurdle, I think Cade Doty, very nice horse, but I wonder when JP has bought the New Lion, is he likely to switch Cade Doty maybe back to a Supreme? I know he's won over 2.5, but I don't think he's a slow horse either. I just wonder, could they split them that way if they think they have a high opinion there? I know there's Kel Histoire to factor in as well, but he's already proven he didn't beat Salvatore Mundi once. Would they try maybe with the other? So I think that's one to factor in. But I thought the runner-up in that maiden hurdle at Leopardstown, Cocktail Divan of Henry de Bromhead's, okay, still a maiden over hurdles, but that was a very, very nice run. I probably didn't give it enough appreciation on the day, and it's kind of in that post-Christmas reflection when watching back, I probably marked up the run affair, but I think he's a really nice horse. I'm not quite sure what his stepping stone will be towards the spring, but wherever he goes, we watched him very much with interest. He's about 20-1 there for the Turners. I think he's a nice type, but the New Lion, if you go back through this race in general, Gavin's pointed out about the record of Challow winners. I think 10 of the last 11 winners are Irish. It'd take a fair bit for me maybe to step off an Irish novice coming in here, but God, he is threatening to do that. He's a very, very nice horse. I think he's as nice probably a novice hurdler England have had in a couple of years. I do fear him, and I think it's probably going to be, if we're to take what we saw at the weekend, that there is such confidence in Salvatore Mundi, maybe it will be the B team of Willie Mullins that goes to the Turners, and that's a great opportunity for England to get grade 1 in this race.
Yeah, if something fails to kind of emerge from that Dublin Racing Festival, I think we really are in a position where the New Line does set quite an intimidating standard, despite what the Challow has previously not exactly produced any winners really of the Cheltenham Festival in recent years. But you'd look outside of that, I'd say I'd have the New Line still over Potter's Charm and the Yellow Clay for this. But say all eyes on the Dublin Racing Festival, as it always is.
Yeah, I suppose it's one of those where obviously the Challow record would worry you, but it's rare you have horses win the Challow Hurdle as easy as he did.
Yeah, you've got that Brainman's Game is then bumping into Bob Ollinger and co. So there's generally something of quite a high caliber coming out of that race to oppose them. They generally run pretty well. They just tend to bump into one or two with a bit too much speed and a bit too much class, but not guaranteed to be the case this year. But we'll learn more in a few weeks. Well,
we will be moving on to the Albert Bartlett and the 2 Novices Chases. But first of all, we're going to hear from a great friend of the show, Donn McClean, and his thoughts on the novice races. Delighted to be joined again in the midway part of the show by Donn McClean, fresh after Christmas time. And you told us all that Banbridge was a certainty for the King George last time, John. So therefore, we've got high expectations, and we're looking ahead.
I'm not sure I said certainty now. I don't think certainty was the word I used.
But a very good Christmas period nonetheless. We're going to be kind of shooting through the novice races at Cheltenham, and we'll start off with the novice hurdlers, looking at the Supreme. Obviously, this Sunday has maybe shown us a bit of a path. Salvatore Mundi winning the Moscow Flyer. He's gone in to being the outright favourite. We have Romeo Coolio as the second favourite, who won the Grade 1 at Leopardstown over Christmas. I suppose we've learned a bit since we last chatted on this show about how that Supreme market is shaping up. Looking at Salvatore Mundi, how did you kind of weigh up his performance on Sunday?
Yeah, mixed, Andrew, for sure. I suppose, he has kind of divided opinion right down the middle. You could take the view that and my overriding view is that he did well to win, given how much he did wrong in the race. Then if he does similarly in a Supreme Novices Hurdle, he won't get away with. We know that. But I thought going to the home turn, he was beaten. I kind of wasn't really. I was watching the horses in front of him and seeing how that was going to pan out. But no, I thought he did really well to win, and he jumped well in the past. He's obviously been a high profile horse since he finished second behind Sugino at Otai, and then Sugino has done what he's been doing. He's been a high profile horse for ages, and he didn't run badly in the Triumph Hurdle last season, but he's getting a good run at it this year, and we can understand why he's been put in as favourite for the Supreme Novices Hurdle for sure. But I do like Romeo Coolio. I kind of liked him for a while. I thought he did really well in the Champion Bumper last season, and he finished second behind Jalan DeVoe racing on the far side. He looked dynamite at Down Royal on his debut this season. His jumping was very good. He could hardly have been any more impressive than he was in winning. And the Royal Bond Hurdle, I went off him after that. I kind of went, well, that's a pity. He's just not as good as we thought he was. But then last time he was brilliant again. I actually fancied Bleu de Vassy to beat him, his stable companion. I thought he would. I backed Bleu de Vassy to beat him, but he just dismissed him. And for me, Bleu de Vassy is a very good horse. I thought an underrated horse going into the race. But Romeo Coolio, he was the Gordon Elliott #1 going into the race. Sam Ewing rode him, and he was just very, very good. And I think that performance, allied to the fact that he proved that he could operate at Cheltenham and under Cheltenham Festival conditions, that's a big positive for me. So, I think I haven't a bet in the race yet, but if I had to have a bet in the race today, it'd be Romeo Coolio, not Salvatore Mundi.
We'll move on to the Turners Novices Hurdle. There's a few now that are both in both markets here, the likes of Kopek to Board, Kate Doty, who I'm sure we'll see at the Dublin Racing Festival. But this race at the moment is being kind of dominated by English-trained horses. We've got the New Lion now in the ownership of JP McManus, Potter's Charm, who was impressive despite us not maybe seeing a whole pile in the Form B. Would either of those kind of tickle your fancy, or is there an Irish horse there that, down the list that you might be interested in?
Yeah, like the New Lion was superb in the shallow hurdle. He won with handspring. I suppose in the back of my mind is the fact that the shallow hurdle, it's really not a good pointer to the Turners. It's been a poor pointer there in recent years, and I kind of had it down to the fact that the shallow hurdle, it's usually a stamina test over 2.5 miles, often on soft ground at Newbury just after Christmas, whereas the Turners, it's a speed test over the trip. It tends to be the pacey horses that tend to pacey horses over the intermediate trip over 2.5 miles or an extended 2.5 miles. They seem to come to the fore. That said, Captain Teague won the shallow hurdle last year, ran in the Albert Bartlett, and I thought that was an astute move, and he disappointed in that. But look, the New Lion couldn't have done much more than he did. He was so impressive in winning it, so you can understand why he's been all the rage in the market. I thought Potter's Charm maybe isn't always getting the credit that he's been due. Like he was very good in winning the Hyde Hurdle at Leopardstown at the November meeting. Sorry, at Cheltenham at the November meeting. And then at Aintree, I thought he was vulnerable over or dropping down and trip to 2 miles in a furlong, given that he'd been so good over 2 miles 5. But you said we didn't see too much of it, but we saw him coming out of the gloom and running out a good winner. He's 4 for 4 over hurdles. I think Billy Diston Davis said directly afterwards that he was going straight for the Turners, and he wasn't deviating from that, even though he's shown the pace to win over 2 miles in a furlong at Aintree. So yeah, I thought maybe the visual impression that the new line created made him the automatic favourite and clear favourite, whereas Palace Charm maybe isn't getting the accolades that he should be getting.
That brings us on nicely to the Albert Bartlett, because I suppose I would look at it a little bit at the moment and look at the Yellow Clay as a real live player if he was to go for the 3-mile race. I'm not sure, as you've been mentioning there in your argument, whether he'd quite have the pace for the intermediate race, especially if it was on a slightly nicer ground. Obviously, over the last couple of years, we have seen soft, heavy ground at the festival, especially in the first couple of days. The Bartlett, always a tricky race. You have a mare like the Big Westerner in there for Henry de Bromhead, who's not your archetypical Albert Bartlett horse, but yet she's been incredibly impressive in her couple of starts under rules.
Yeah, no, she was very good the last day at Limerick, wasn't she? She stayed on really strongly. She looked the most likely winner from a long way out, and she found all that it looked like she was going to find as well. And that race, it is a very good pointer to the Albert Bartlett Hurdle. It's about 2 miles 7 on heavy ground at Limerick, and Tallow Tower won it, Penhill won it. It's a race that has obviously have won that race, have gone on and won the Albert Bartlett. So, and we know that the Albert Bartlett, it's generally a real stamina race, isn't it? Like you really have to see it out. It can be a little bit of a dour test. And Limerick at Christmas over 3 miles, or nearly 3 miles for novices. That's all.
That's a test.
So it probably wasn't as stern a test this year as it has been. The ground just, while it just wasn't bottomless, it was kind of normal soft ground at Limerick. But she did well to win. I thought Mozzie's sister maybe didn't jump as well as she can, and thought maybe she did well to stay on, to take second behind her. But similar to the new line, the Big Westerner, she was impressive in winning, and she's a likely race mare. She stays good. She's probably better ground would be an unknown for her, but shouldn't be that big an issue, especially over the extreme trip to the Albert Bartlett. So you can see why she's been popular in the market. The Yellow Clay, if he were to go here, he'd be of interest for me there as well.
We'll switch spheres to the novice chases, where we've got the Arkle. Now, in my eyes, at the moment, certainly, it kind of looks like a 2-horse race. And it's been a long, long time since we've had 2 juvenile hurdlers leading the way in a novice chase at the festival. We do with Madgebury, who obviously won the Triumph Hurdle in the absence of Sergino. Quite a lot of people would say that Sergino would have won the Triumph Hurdle if he was there. Hard to know, if buts and maybes. But you've got 2 horses that have made spectacular chasing debuts and really smart horses. If you were to go, it's almost an impossible task to say which way to go at the moment. But if you were to pin your colours to one mast, who would it be, Don?
At the prices, Madgebury. I think the disparity between him and the market is greater than it should be. Look, Sergino, he's brilliant, and all that Nicky Henderson was saying about his schooling beforehand, that came to pass. He was very, very good. Over his fences, Ballyburn just wasn't slick, and he got the march on him over 2 miles. And look, he's still unbeaten. Sergino, he's a 5th hurdle winner as a 4-year-old. Not that many 5-year-olds have tried in the Arkle since then, and definitely no 5-year-old as good as Sergino and Madgebury are. It was on a line to Cargese, and there's not much between Sergino and Madgebury as juvenile hurdlers. Madgebury beat her by a length and a half, I think, in the Triumph Hurdle. Sergino beat her by just over 3 lengths in the 4-year-old hurdle at Aintree. So it's not, and it looks like she ran her race on both occasions. So, on a strict line of form through her, there isn't that much between them. And Cargese obviously bolstered that form by winning at Punchestown. So it's all very solid. Maybe the form of Madgebury's beginner's case took a bit of a knock when the Asian Master and Tully Hill got beaten there by Mr. Giff at the weekend. I think there's, as it goes without saying, there's much more to come from Madgebury. And I just think maybe because of Sergino's profile and because he won the Wayward Lad Chase at Kempton over Christmas when the world was watching, whereas Madgebury won a beginner's chase at Fairy House in the middle of December. I just don't think maybe he had that race. Madgebury himself had the profile that Sergino has, and I think that profile is factored into the market. Look, Sergino may be the better horse. He may be a better horse and Madgebury over fences, and hopefully God, they'll meet in the Arkle and we'll find out. But I just think as things stand at the moment, on the evidence that we have, they should be closer in the Arkle market than they are.
Ballyburn tops the market for the Brown Advisory Novices Chase on the back of that. Now, people will have strong views on Ballyburn. I would be in absolutely no rush to be backing him for this race. I know the last day at Kempton wouldn't have suited him over 2 miles on, decent enough ground, but I'm not sure whether his fencing has completely convinced me in his 2 starts thus far, and we'll have to go and prove it. I know in the Brown Advisory market, one of your probably stronger fancies of the whole 5 races comes in this from a value perspective down the line.
Days ahead, I think he'll relish a stamina test. And look, he's the Martin Pipe Hurdle winner from last season. He was impressive in winning it. We know the Martin Pipe Hurdle can be a springboard for the top staying chasers of the future. Galloping the Champ won it, and Banbridge won it, the King George winner, and Vic won it. It's a race that Sir de Champ won it as well. It's a race that horses, it seems to be more of a test of stamina than speed. I think a Brown Advisory chase at Cheltenham for premium, or stamina's at premium, that's going to be a positive for better days ahead. Plus the fact that he's a Cheltenham Festival winner as well, like that to me. And if you have a look at the Martin Pipe Hurdle again, he really grounded out up the hill, and that's going to be a big asset to take back there. So I think better days ahead. I thought he should have been shorter in the Brown Advisory market than he is.
I'd like to remind you all that are watching that you can avail of fantastic offers from our sponsors, Boyle Sports. One being best odds guaranteed on all selected races. Make sure to click the link in the description down below to avail of a fantastic offer. We will move on to the Albert Bartlett as a result. And Gavin, we'll come to you first, because I know you were impressed with a mare over Christmas time down in Limerick. That Limerick race is usually a decent enough pointer to the Albert Bartlett as well. Winners have come from that race before, and the Big Westerner was very good and probably not the standard type of mare you get in a race like this.
Yeah, I think she's a lovely mare. She battled very well to beat Argento Boy over 2.6 and Punchestown wins over 2.7. A lot of the time in the Albert Bartlett, we look at 2.5 milers stepping up in grade from the Lawlers, etc., and you think, oh, geez, that horse will love 3 miles, but it doesn't always happen. I was having a look at the previous winners of this race. Like, we probably shouldn't even be talking about this race, because you're talking about last year was 33 to 1, previous 2 years 18 to 1, 18 to 1, I think 4 to 1 and 50 to 1. So the Bartlett is probably the hardest race in the whole of Cheltenham to find the winner of. I really like the Big Westerner. Excuse me. She travels brilliant. She jumps brilliant. She's a fine big mare. She'll be getting the £7. I don't think a mare has ever won the Bartlett, but very few have tried. Final Demand was good in Limerick in what was a very weak race. The third horse, I think, won yesterday. The Yellow Clay would be a big danger. I see he's a shorter price on Betfair for the Bartlett than he is for the Turners. So interesting to see where he goes. But yeah, I think the Big Westerner getting the £7. She definitely stays. She jumps. I think she could be a star of the future.
Yeah, well, again, we've got another boost for you here, because the Albert Bartlett, the Big Westerner, is being boosted from 9 to 1 out to 12 to 1 by our sponsors, Boyle Sports. Again, similar ante-post rules apply, and similarly is going to be online until midnight on Thursday. Max stake 50 quid. So make sure to avail of that if you do fancy the Big Westerner. She does seem to have a very good chance. Mark, as Gavin said, the Albert Bartlett is it's a law unto yourself, really, looking through this race. It's a race that I've had kind of perverse pleasure trying to pick apart in years gone by, but it seems to get harder year on year.
Well, here's the thing. Last year's winner, I think he only managed to come over on the very last lorry of Gordon Elliott's after Crow Park didn't manage to run in the race. Like, he wasn't even going to travel up until 48 hours beforehand. So for me, it's a horrible question to ask someone for an Albert Bartlett fancy 2 months out, but I do think Final Demand, if they ended up going this direction, he's very, very interesting. We're just trying to, I suppose, this stage speculate what way Willie Mullins will split them. Perhaps he will keep to a shorter trip, but I thought it was interesting to see he's in at the Dublin Racing Festival in the 2.6 Novice Hurdle. That can be a pathway towards this. But honest to God, lads, I think if you're going to have a bet in this race at this stage, you're going to want to be rewarded with value. And I don't think kind of Final Demand at the minute, it's any great steal at around. I think there is 10 to 1 out there. Joint best price Boyle Sports are at the moment. Maybe you will shorten up, but it just doesn't appeal to me. You could look at it a different way. You could say the Yellow Clay is making a market there if he does go for a Turners. Maybe if you wanted to spin down a long way there, there's a horse of 40 to 1, Wingmen. I think he's got a big engine. I think he's sort of horse the trip boys getting out to 3 miles will suit him. Gordon Elliott's record in the Albert Bartlett, he is well able to do it with horses who have that battle-hardened campaign. I think he is getting that done. His jumping was better last time. I think having a horse on his right is definitely a help for him jumping. I'd be concerned if he didn't, but I'm sure they'll ride him that way accordingly at Cheltenham. He just won that on the day. He could wind up a big price, bringing Grade 1 form in there from the Lawlers. But I'd be very, very much treating this with caution. As it's a tough one on the day, let alone 2 months out.
Yeah, very much so. But I'm very glad that Dan is a man of value. I think your middle name might as well be value, and therefore it would be remiss of you not to have something for us at a big price.
Yeah, and this is maybe going to the extreme end, but Western Knight at 80 to 1 round, the area around that, I think there's reason to believe that is not the worst ante-post price in the world. Really progressive hurdler for Joe Tizard, won on his debut doing a lot wrong, and the runner-up actually won his next 2, then went to Ascot under a penalty and beat Excello, who's a fair benchmark. That race has actually been won by Elegant Escape, and we last saw him second in the Albert Trial, the Grade 2, at the December meeting behind Jet Blue. He had a lot of experience in France and a lot of experience over shorter, and I think that race developed into a relative test of speed. Western Knight was kind of always off the pace tracking him. JetBlue got first run. He could never just erode that deficit, but kept on really well. Joe Tizard said after the race they were delighted with that, and that the Albert Bartlett is the long-term plan with him. They look like they're going to go to the River Donn, which is a race Sailway Faye was second in before winning the Bartlett a couple of years ago. He's an improving young horse. I think there's only one race he'll go for. The Tizards have won this before with Kilbrick and Storm at a big price. I think when you're looking at this race, you'll find a lot of non-runners and a lot of horses who probably won't shorten. But I think at least with Western Knight, if he goes to the River Donn and wins it, which I don't think is much to fear in the staying hurdling division in this side of the Irish Sea anyway, I think that's an entirely possible scenario. They've already outlined that this is the only race for him. You'd find worse 80 to 1 shots anyway. But as you say, despite Andrew almost making us talk about this race and going, such a difficult race to talk about, here we are. But tread with caution as always with this race.
But I do enjoy it. I enjoy us having to painfully.
You say you like to unpick it. You unpick it by picking a John McConnell horse who ran in October at 33 to 1.
It used to be a foolproof way of finishing third. It happened year on year. The one horse, and I didn't put it up for any race in particular because I have absolutely no idea what race it would run in. But if Ballygunner Castle goes up in trip, whether that be the Turners or the Albert Bartlett, I'd love to see him. I don't know what's happened to him because he keeps getting entered and keeps not being declared. I thought he was very impressive at Fairy House when, if he wasn't hampered by a loose horse, he would have won by 5 or 6 lengths. Horse who came third, unfortunately, is no longer with us, but would have won on the weekend for Martin Brazel. Don't Stop the Music. So he's a horse certainly I'm going to be keeping on side.
Just jump in there, Andrew. I was going to mention him as well, but the thing that put me off was he's got a 2 mile entry at the DRF, but not the 2.6. I thought he'd be tailor-made for the 2.6. I like that. He's got, you like an Albert Bartlett horse experience. He's had 3 goals in bumpers. I really liked him as well, but just I stopped short of mentioning him when the DRF entries are there, but I hope you're right because he's a proper horse, I think.
Yeah, I'm hoping there might be a little bit of the nice guy about him almost, that he's been running over 2 miles. But he won a 2 mile 3 bumper on heavy ground down in Limerick, so this horse doesn't not stay. I think he'd be tap for toe in Grade 1 company over 2 miles personally, but I think he's a very nice horse and one to potentially keep on side should he go out in trip. Our sponsors, Boyle Sports, are also giving money back if second to the SB5 on selected meetings. So make sure to click the link down in the description below to avail of more money back offers. We'll move over to the novice chases. The Arkle, fascinating race. I think it's been a long, long time since we've had 2 juveniles leading the market for an Arkle. But in Sergino and Madgeborough, Gavin, we've got 2 incredibly above average juveniles from last year. Difficult to split the 2 of them. Madgeborough Triumph Hurdle winner. Sergino probably did the rest of the winning in the juvenile campaign last year. How would you split them? And do you believe it to be a 2-horse race at the moment?
I believe it will be if the ground was good to soft. I think Il Atlantique would want a bit of heavy in the description to have a chance against these 2. Lotus Sud will be there. 14 to 1 shot would have a squeak, travels very well, jumps well, but probably not good enough. I think the field will end up with only 6 or 7. Madgeborough each way at 3 to 1. You put a tenner each way, finish the second or third, you're getting 16 quid back for your 20. Look, Sergino looked amazing in Kempton. Ballyburn going right-handed 2 miles on a quick track like that didn't suit him, but Sergino looks amazing. So does Madgeborough. So, backing a horse at 4 to 6, 8 to 11, that's all very well. I very, very rarely will back an odds-on shot. That's fine when you're not taking on a lot. But to back a horse at 4 to 6, taking on Madgeborough is probably... I mightn't be brave enough. So I think I'd probably just do chicken out and back Madgeborough each way.
Yeah, I can very much see that case. Donn McClean was kind of intimating that as well. He thought they should be a lot kind of closer in the market together, given what they've produced. I think his angle there was the fact that I think because Madgeborough won, a beginner's chase in the middle of December when maybe not the whole world was watching, everyone was watching Sergino over Christmas time. Mark, I suppose the only thing you could maybe throw at Madgeborough if you were being a bit snippy was the two horses that he beat in the beginner's chase were beaten again by Mr. Giff on the weekend.
That's a fair point. I think it was more style about the way he went about it than pure form terms. And I think the time of year when he ran as well, how Willie Mullins runners, you typically expect him to improve from it. Albeit he have 16 horses beaten at 2-1 or shorter over Christmas, 30 beaten at 4-1 or shorter in that kind of fortnight around Christmas. So it wasn't typical improvement from that time. But I look at Madgeborough, in any other year, you'd love him for this. But I just think Sergino is a different type of beast. I'd be very, very shocked if he got beat. I think he's, if you're looking at multiples, provided he gets there in one piece, I think there was some wow performance with that at Christmas. I guess, look, Ballyburn, that wasn't his bag. I was very disappointed because I think in terms of ability, purely on potential, I think the two of them shouldn't be that far apart, but his jumping let him down big time. Ballyburn, it wasn't his test. But Sergino, I think he'll scare off a lot of them. The point Gavin makes about the field size, it's one I've been kind of mulling over, because in one part of my head I'm thinking, you get a short price favourite like that, it's going to put people to go other places. But now we have this new program at Cheltenham where you don't have the option if you're without being qualified to run that 2.5 handicap on the Thursday now. So maybe more will try their hand at it. But if we did look and we're breaking into a smaller field, load aside at 14s is probably overpriced from an each way perspective. I can see the way Gavin's trying to approach the race. Maybe that's another angle into it if you wanted an each way. But I think they're playing for place if Sergino turns up like the horse he was at Christmas. Grade 1 potential ability over hurdles. He looked every bit, if not better, over fences.
Yeah, Dan, I suppose looking at Sergino, what price would he be for the champion hurdle if he was running in it? He'd surely be short.
Yeah. Well, I think he's got an entry for it anyway. It's very much the contingency plan. I guess that you may have to have that in the back of your mind as well. We're still playing ante-post. If something happens to Constitution Hill, that team's going to have a dilemma on their hands. Do they go to the Arkle, where they're probably going to be an odds-on short, or do they go to the champion hurdle, where would they be favourite? I'd say I think that would almost encourage Brighter Days Ahead to go there if there's no Constitution Hill. And I think Sheed, getting the £7, would probably edge favouritism. But he's the rightful favourite for the Arkle anyway. I mean, what he did to Ballyburn. And I think you almost draw a line through Roubaud there, who had his ideal conditions, is 150 rated hurdler. And that's pretty much his level. He couldn't go with the pair from an early stage. And it wasn't anything due to it necessarily even jumping poorly. They just went a gallop he was completely uncomfortable with. Ballyburn was uncomfortable as well. And I just look at a lot of the novices from last year. I think I'm not exactly enamoured by many of them. I think a lot have turned out to be a bit disappointing. But the one exceptional novice was Ballyburn. And Sergino's made him look, despite obviously Ballyburn not having his ideal conditions there, really ordinary with the pace and the way he's jumped. I think Sergino could be top draw. And I hope that we're in a world where we're almost getting Sergino versus John Bon in some of these grade ones this side of the Irish Sea anyway, because I think that would be really interesting next year. And seemingly, connections think he has all the credentials to go on that similar path to Alti or to Shishkin, to John Bon. Yeah, I think we're dealing with an exceptional racehorse here. Yeah,
well, it's a very good way of bringing us to the Brown Advisory using Ballyburn, who's the favourite for this race at 7-2 with Boyle Sports. Got the Jukebox Man in there, who was very impressive at Kempton. Other plenty of decent horses in there. Dancing City, who won a couple of grade ones last year for Willie Mullins, was decent enough on Chase debut. Mark, Ballyburn, discuss. I just 7-2 is an awfully skimpy price given what he's done over fences.
If he goes to the Dublin Racing Festival and does what you hope he'll do, which is go and win that 2 mile 6 novice chase, win it with a bit of authority, put behind the jumping performance at Kempton, 7-2, all of a sudden you're sitting on a value ticket, because he's going to tighten up for that. You look back at what the relative abilities of these horses were as novice hurdlers, it's going to tidy up a lot. But at 7-2, you'd want to be a very, very brave person to face him with the way he jumped at Kempton. Like that, I can't back him at 7-2 as it stands. It's a sit and watch. It's a Dublin Racing Festival, let you learn. And the Jukebox Man is still going to hold a little bit of that market too. Definitely improvement in him since going chasing. You can't say the same has been there from Ballyburn. I was pleased the first day at Punchestown, and seemed to take a big blow, and I thought there was obvious angles for him to improve from Punchestown. But I suppose on paper the 3 miles is a new thing. But you look back at his pedigree, like he's a full brother to Noble Endeavour, one of Paddy Power. Dan probably backed that as well years ago. He's probably just keeping that under his hat. And you have other horses there that are out and out 3-milers. This guy he's bred to stay without question. I thought he was quicker than he actually is at Kempton. I read him wrong in that sense, but I wouldn't have a concern stepping up. I don't like when a horse's year goes a little bit by the wayside midway through it, but as Eddie mentioned, that William Mullins period over Christmas where not all of them clicked, and the two that went to Kempton certainly didn't click. So, maybe a little bit of grace to be required there. Champ Kiley of the bigger price ones there, if you're looking at something, I really liked what he did at Fairyhouse. I actually did an interview with Danny Mullins in the Irish Field just before Christmas, and I asked him for one to follow for the year, and he nominated Champ Kiley. He was very, very sweet in him, and he very much lived up to what Danny had said as well. Jumping, I thought, was very, very solid for first time up off the track a long time. Was entitled to be rusty, but I was pleased with what Champ Kiley did, and I think he is a runner here. But just Ballyburn, to me, he's kind of in that proper Champions League type of horse. But God Almighty, the jumping last time, I can't face him at 7-2 just for the moment.
No, you'd have to be a braver man than myself, Gavin. How would you view this race? Obviously, the Jukebox Man was good at Kempton, very unlucky not to win the Albert Bartlett last year. Was probably the best horse in the race. On that form, he holds Dancing City, but can that form be turned around?
Yeah, well, of course, Dancing City went and beat him then in Aintree, so it's 1-1 between them from last season. The Jukebox Man, his first time over fences, he was very flamboyant. That's okay for the first day, but the second day, his jumping was just perfectly tidy. Sat in second, came through to beat Highland very easily. Ballyburn's jumper, we've mentioned, he is going to be better left-handed. I meant to say that about Magborough too. I think he'll be better left-handed. But Ballyburn jumped a bit to his left, jumped badly. I don't know how he got across the last fence. He seemed to paddle out through it. Perhaps he'll see a lot better further at the DRF over 2.5, 2.6. Is he definitely going to stay? He probably showed on breeding. I liked Dancing City first time over fences in Punchestown. I backed it before it ran there to win this race. I see he's into 5 and 6 to 1. It's probably a little bit short at the moment, Dancing City, but I was impressed enough. Beat Shannon Royale, who won since. Last season, he took a while to get going, and he ended up going to the DRF. He went to Cheltenham, he went to Aintree, and he went to Punchestown, and he won 3 out of 4. So he's an iron horse. He'll stay forever. The old course, which this is ran on, mightn't exactly suit him. Be better if it was the new track. Others that we've that worth mentioning is Champ Kiley, as we mentioned, that Mark said, better days ahead of a squeak, and also Gorgeous Tom at 33 to 1. Second in the Drinamore, staying on the death. If he got good ground, I'd say he could run in this race and have a little squeak. So maybe Dancing City, but I'm not impressed with the price.
No, well, I can do some work for you, Gavin, here with our sponsors, Boyle Sports, because Dancing City is out to 7 to 1 standout.
That's more like it.
For the Brown Advisory Novices Chase, if you want to be involved. Again, ante-post rules apply. Again, 50 quid a person. If you want to go in different guises, be my guest. Andy Dufresne it up. But Dancing City is available at 7 to 1 until Thursday midnight. So make sure to click the link down in the description below. Dan, quickly, Brown Advisory, any massive thoughts on the race?
No, I get what you're talking about, Ballyburn's price, but I can also very much see a world in which he's almost touching 6 to 4 post Dublin Racing Festival. He's already a very short price for the 2 mile 5 race at the DRF. I think there's every chance he wins that and wins it quite well. I think he was the exceptional novice of last season, and those in opposition, I'm not overly enamoured by. I think he was the clear standout top-class novice in a very ordinary crop, in my opinion. The likes of Dancing City, I can almost see, if it turns into a similar race to last year, which was a relative test of speed at 3 miles, which it can do on relatively decent ground on the old course at Cheltenham, I think that would suit him perfectly. A likes of a Dancing City, who is a real doubt stayer. I could almost see him being the one who could make up into a dark horse for the Gold Cup next year, because I think a real doubt, a test of stamina would suit him. At least now Ballyburn settles a bit better than he did as a novice hurdler. He almost used to kick himself in the head. His head was that low far down. Doesn't seem to be the case now. I'd side with him. 7 to 2 isn't a great price, but I still do think there's a world in which he goes off an awful lot shorter.
We'll move on to the final part of the show, which is our 60-second selections. As I said at the start, we couldn't have had a better Christmas time with plenty of winners. So therefore, we're looking for one Cheltenham Festival bet at the moment that's going to win. No pressure at all. Dan, I'm starting with you.
And I'm going to go off piste for a handicap. The last race of the week, the Martin Pipe, Manila 6-0. 40% of runners who have finished in the top 4 of this race in the last 10 years won't now qualify because of the new rule requiring novices to have 5 runs or more over hurdles. He's already had the 5 runs. He was second to Polished Charm over in October. That was a really good run. He's a stamina-laden horse, which tends to suit Martin Pipes. I think he has a very similar profile to the likes of Better Days Ahead, Blow by Blow. Champlain Classic, who all went to win a Martin Pipe for Gordon Elliott. So he was a decent third at that Greater Limerick, won by the Big Westerner, who's Gavin has already mentioned, a leading contender for the Albert Bartlett. Split Mozzie's sister and Fleur in the Park, whose form ties in closely with the Yarrow Clay, who's obviously quite a short price for the Turners as well. I think a lot of that form is stacking up. That's a race Delta Work was second in before winning the Martin Pipe. He has a rating 133 in Ireland. He got a mark 137 in the UK when he was entered for a Pertemps qualifier. That would be the slight concern. They may go the 3-mile route with him, but I think because there's going to be a lack of Irish novices who are going to qualify for this race, and the fact he's already had the 5 runs over hurdles, I mean, he's 21 for the Martin Pipe. He has the profile of a horse who could shorten quite drastically if he goes for this race.
Mark, come to yourself. Who are you fancying?
Delta Work at 12-1 for the cross country is just too big at 16s. I think he's a horse that well. The one day they circled in the calendar is this. He's proven himself as highly effective around here in the past. Gordon Elliott's record here is on the money, and I think with this type of horse, his season leading up to it, you can almost disregard the type of shape it takes, because it is all about Cheltenham and the Grand National. And last year in the Grand National, second Dia Maximus off 157. I thought that was a huge effort. And in ground wise, he probably does want it on the softer side. It's still going to be safe. This race through last year, we obviously had the issue where it didn't even go ahead, and this was my nap of the week last year, and he didn't get to run, and it was fair sick watching him in the National go so close after. But I do think the way the season has gone, Stumptown is going to be favourite for this race. And Stumptown, he's got the way the handicap is now shaped, he's got his penalty. He's won, I think, off 149 last time. You're now in the rounds for Delta Work. I don't have an official mark for at the moment published, but tailed off 159 last time. There's not actually going to be a huge amount between these two at the weights, and I think Delta Work is a far superior horse, even though their careers are at different stages. Stumptown is in the ascendancy, but Delta Work has form that Stumptown could never have matched previously. So I think Delta Work, just at the prices, if you're looking at one that on the day is going to be an awful lot shorter, and the way the year has been gained, give me a bit of Delta Work each way.
Gavin, no pressure at all, but 5 winners last time out. If you could give us 6 this time, that'd be brilliant.
I'm actually going to give you an each way lucky 15, if you don't mind. I'm going to start with Romeo Coolio. You have the price boost there with Boyles at 15-2. Very good at Christmas in a fast time. He jumps great. There's no complications with him. He settles really well. The new tactics of been up at the pace seems to suit him much better. So I think he's got a great chance each way in the Supreme. Going to go with the Big Western that we mentioned in the Bartlett. She's 12-1 price boost there with Boyles. She's unbeaten. She battled well in Punchestown. She showed a bit of class for me in Limerick. She's won over the trip, say 2-7, and handles bad ground. She jumps fantastic, travels really well. I think she's got a great chance in the Bartlett. And the other two are 6.5. Belonging to Gavin Cromwell at 6-1 each way in the Mayor's Novice Hurdle. She was very, very impressive. For me, before Saturday, there was no standout in the Mayor's Novice category. Obviously, we haven't seen Maureen yet, but I think 6.5 is great each way chance. And the last one is Cargeese in the Mayor's Hurdle at 4-1. Taking a chance the brighter days ahead goes to the Champion Hurdle. But even if she does go here, Cargeese will definitely be in the first 3. I think she'll stay. She has been a bit keen. The change of tactics worked well at Punchestown. So Cargeese is the 4th one. So the 4 are Romeo Coolio, the Big Westerner, 6.5, and Cargeese each way lucky 15. There you go.
If that cops, none of us will be here next year, unfortunately. We'll all be in the Caribbean. In the Mayor's Novices Hurdle, I do agree with Gavin. I'm not sure there's massive standard setters, and 6.5 is now that standard setter. However, I'm going to go for the solid option in Diva Luna for Ben Pauling at 14-1. I think she's a very fair price. This race in the past tends to go to prominent racing, kind of hard-staying horses. She's won over the course over 2.5 miles. Grade 2 bumper winner. She's going to go back down to 2 miles next time out. And she's got a bit of speed. She's just a likable type of horse. She's going to stay well. She jumps well. She'll be in the van. I don't see there being massive amounts of quality in the race. As I say, maybe the Cromwell horse is the fly in the ointment there. But at the moment, she's the only one that I'd be really, really fearful of. So 14-1, a little bit like Mark on Delta Work, I think is just too big a price each way for the Mayor's Novices Hurdle. But anyway, that concludes the episode. Really hope you enjoyed the chat. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Racing TV channel down below. Of course, gives us plenty of support, and make sure to avail of all those price boosts, all the offers from Boyle Sports that we said throughout the show. You can get 15-2 Romeo Coolio, 12-1 the Big Westerner, 7-1 Dancing City. You can get money back. You can get it all on Boyle Sports. So make sure to look in the subscription down below for the relevant links. And again, we will see you next time out for a Dublin Racing preview on the Wire.
Boyle Sports. Don't just bet, choose wisely.